you don't know how to start.
It's not possible for you to know which is the right file, the right page and the right document to look into in the first few months of practice.
And you don't know where to start, where to end.
It takes time to identify how to start reading the case file.
Go through every page of the case file and know what has been said and what the arguments have been at every stage and what the findings on those arguments have been.
Never restrict yourself to the big picture, never restrict yourself to only the broad points, because it's not the broad point that always gets the job done in court. It's sometimes the trees that play better than the forest.
Starting out, just read all the facts possible and then you can figure out what is relevant later on.
Through the entire file, from cover to cover.
Don't skim through the file. That is something you learn with experience, but when you are starting off, it's best to read all of the file and then figure out later on what is relevant.
We start reading from the first page. It's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. It's a whole bunch, and we continue reading it. And at the end of 3 days, we realize that, all right, I've read the entire file, but I don't remember what happened when.
So the first thing you have to keep in mind is that this entire process is oriented towards arguments in court. Okay, whether you are reading a file, you are drafting something, or you are doing research, ultimately it's all oriented towards either standing up and arguing yourself or assisting someone who is going to stand up and make oral arguments. One very important to ask yourself before you start what that next day's hearing is for, or what the hearing that you're preparing is for. I mean, obviously the way you will prepare for, say, admissions is very different from the way you will prepare a matter for final arguments.
You have to be fully aware of what the relief which is being sought in the case.
You may know the file from a substantive point of view better than anyone in the world, better than the judge and better than the arguing counsel. But ultimately what gets you heard in court is your ability to answer standard questions that a court typically throws. So for instance, it may ask, what was the last date of the order? And it may ask you, what are these miscellaneous applications for, before it proceeds to the meat of the matter.
What that does is, when you know what you are seeking beforehand, that is before you're reading the file, you know how to read the file.
It's important to look into the provision that has been cited, at least as far as the primary procedural applications are concerned. Most people, what they do is they read their version of the story and stop it at that. And they pay very little attention to the argument that comes from the opposing side.
Then you also need to know the averments which have been made by the other side in the counter affidavit and in your rejoinder if you are the petitioner.
And it's important for us to be as familiar with the arguments of the opposing side as your own arguments, and not dismiss them outright. So what I'd suggest is, when you read and when you present your arguments in court, you will always do so with a view to preempt the arguments which may come at a subsequent point of time when the other side is given an opportunity to present its version of the story.
Prepare a list of dates.
So you make a list of dates.
First thing which you must do is, you have to make a list of dates.
Summarize the events starting from day one, giving of course relative emphasis to each event and how it shapes the litigation.
Which is very important. Flag the entire file.
And make notes on the file. So ultimately, notes are like a aid when you're standing up and arguing, right? So make a list of dates, make a list of witnesses, whatever the nature of the file requires.
Because otherwise you will not remember. A senior would see the file and within seconds he would know what is where. But you wouldn't be able to know.
It's really helpful to put it all down on paper.
Like bullet points, and keep a printout or something handy for your own self. Not to give it to the senior, but for your own self. And later on, even after 3 months, when the matter is listed again, you will see those pointers and you will know it.